MS-13 gang members on April 2nd kicked to death and stabbed to death a K-9 that was on duty at the Sussex 1 State Prison in Virginia. Let's talk about this tragic story, and then we'll talk about MS-13 and the investigation. On April 2nd, it is stated in reports that MS-13 inmates were attacking another inmate when a K-9 officer by the name of Fields, she ran with her K-9 to assist in stopping the attack or helping with the attack and quelling the disturbance. When they entered to assist, MS-13 inmates, like the dirty pigs they are, held to their oath. What is their oath? Their oath is to attack and kill anything that gets in their way, especially law enforcement. And they did just that by kicking to death and stabbing to death K-9 Riven, pictured here, who was soon to be 6 years old and had been on duty with the prison system since about 2019, and later died after the incident, was pronounced dead later. So now the three suspects, verified as members of MS-13 that hail out of El Salvador and Guatemala, are facing criminal charges, of course, for what? Several things. Attacking another inmate, murdering a K-9. A K-9 is a law enforcement officer. They have a record on file just like I would, just like the K-9 handler would, who, by the way, the K-9 handler had non-life-threatening injuries, non-serious injuries. Now, the K-9 investigation, in my opinion, should be handled like a homicide investigation. They killed a law enforcement officer, K-9 Riven. So I would hope that any internal affairs investigations, any outside agencies that come in to investigate, I'm sure they'll handle it like a homicide investigation. Now this brings another topic to light. I was just asked the other day, I believe it was on my last video, and I believe the comment is there, where someone said, hey, talking about how inmates should be treated and so forth, how would you handle inmates? Would you do it like they do in Norway or Germany? And I said, look, I have actually visited those prisons in Germany that are using that technique, where they all have civilian clothes and their own key to their own room, they call it. I call it a cell, but their own TV, their own bed, their own private bathroom with a door. Okay, that's all nice and dandy, but I told that person I do not believe, and I actually mentioned MS-13. MS-13 could be handled in that manner. I do not believe, in my opinion, the nicey Norway method would work. Do I think that method works with a lot of inmates? I think there are a lot of inmates that treated in that manner would behave and maybe even help rehabilitate in that manner rather than the harsh hand, right? And I'm not talking about abusing inmates. That is totally against the rules. And it is not right, and I do not condone abusing inmates. But what about these violent inmates? Not just MS-13, but your violent inmate in general. And MS-13 is known to be one of the most violent gangs in the world. All they do is attack and eliminate anything that gets in their way. That's all they believe in. And they even have had hits on officers on the streets as a type of initiation. Go kill that officer. And we had one killed years ago over in another county. I think it was Pasco. The officer had 26 years. Killed him as he sat in his patrol car next to a 7-Eleven type store. For no reason whatsoever other than to be initiated into the MS-13. I do not believe we can handle them in an average regular prison. I told that person. MS-13 must be housed in a max, super max, whatever you want to call it. But they need to be, you know, escorted, handcuffed, bent over, and walk like this wherever they go. And they need to be fed through a food slot. And they get their 1 hour rec. But they are not the type of inmate that we can just allow to wander around and commit these type of crimes. In one day, they were beating another inmate and then they killed a K-9. Who's next? A correctional officer, man or woman? I just want to throw these things out there. What are the penalties for murdering a K-9? You may ask while we're talking about this. Well, in Florida, Governor DeSantis in 2019 signed into law that if you murder a K-9 or a law enforcement animal, you know, horses for law enforcement, horses for agriculture deputies, whatever, you can get up to 15 years in prison. Federal law was initiated in the year 2000 saying 10 years prison, up to 10 years prison for killing a law enforcement animal. I would venture to say that probably some of these M13 that did the killing of this K-9 have a life sentence, so they don't care. But if they don't have a life sentence, and even if they do, we need to punish them, charge them criminally, do a good thorough homicide investigation, an aggravated battery investigation for the inmate that was being beaten and attacked, and tack it on their darn sentence anyway, even if they have life. Tack it on there. We cannot allow this to happen in our prisons. We're letting our prisons get away from us. What would I look for in the homicide investigation? Well, other than the normal homicide investigation, you know, I would want to see the standard operating procedure for the K-9 within this correctional facility. K-9 handler SOP, how would they respond to the scene? And I am not Monday morning quarterbacking. Somebody was in trouble, somebody called for assistance, and this K-9 handler went to the scene. But the reason I'm mentioning that we need the operating procedures, when you do a thorough investigation in a prison, homicide investigation, you need to have all the operating procedures, standard operating procedures, the policies and procedures, the dorm, that specific dorm procedures. Who's allowed to respond to these type things and when can they respond? All hands on deck. Anybody that's free should respond, in my opinion. But we still have to document that in our investigation. You hear people say, oh, look, they're getting those policies and procedures to try to burn somebody. No, nobody's going to try to burn this K-9 handler. But think about this. When we go to court, the defense is going to look for those things. The defense is going to try to find loopholes to protect these dirty, mangy pigs because they have to. They're allowed to have a defense attorney. That's their right in this country. And that defense attorney has to do the best job they can. So don't blame the defense attorney for doing that. They're just doing the job that they're paid to do. I myself would rather be a state attorney, but hey. When you do this, you have to get ahead of the game and get ahead of the defense attorney. That's why we need all this, okay? So let's pray for the officers to be safe among these MS-13 pigs and other violent inmates and other violent inmate gangs within our prisons and jails in the United States. And say a prayer for K-9 Riven, who stood between good and evil to protect its K-9 handler and others, and died while doing it. Gary York, True Prison Stories. Please subscribe.